Head coach Jay Woodcroft said ahead of Game 6 that the fourth victory in a series is always the hardest, and Saturday evening certainly proving that point, but it is the Edmonton Oilers punching their ticket to the second round as they get set to take on the Vegas Golden Knights. Welcome to the panel presented by Sportsnet. Pleased to be joined by a pair of voices of the Edmonton Oilers, Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer. And Bob, it truly was a full team effort. 18 different Oilers register a point against the Kings.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think we all know that LA had a really good team. So all along we thought it was going to be a tough series. Both teams were better than they were a year ago. And I think Edmonton showed, that they got a pretty good chin a couple times. Game 2, after how Game 1 ended and responding after blowing a 2-goal lead in that game. And then you talked about the depth scoring. It was Klim Kostin scoring the game-winning goal in that game. And then in Game 4, a comeback, the comeback at Crypto for Edmonton down 3-0 after a period. And really, in fairness, I think if you look at the final 3 games of the series, the Oilers scored 16 goals in the last 9 periods, if you include the overtime period. So the Oilers were the highest scoring team in the league. Part of the reason they were the highest scoring team in the league was depth. It wasn't just Connor and Leon. It's an illustration of the progression and growth and maturation. A lot of their prospects coming up from the minors and growing into legitimate NHL players, but also some of the acquisitions that Ken Hall made. They beat a real good team, beating LA in 6.
Yeah, depth contributions truly was the difference. But when you look at the top-end scoring, Jack, it reads Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, and Evan Bouchard. He had a series that was historic in franchise history.
Well, it's been coming for a couple months now. He's got 29 points in his last 25 games. He joins Paul Coffey as the only Oiler D-man ever to have 10 points in a playoff series. He had 8 power play points in the series alone. Only 3 other defensemen had ever done that in the history of the league. But again, it traces back to the acquisition that Bob Stauffer talked about, which was Matthias Ekholm. It allowed Bouchard to shine, and Ekholm did everything for a lot of people on the back end. He gave Darnell Nurse some support in terms of constantly handling the opposition's top line. He allowed Brett Kulak to thrive in a third pairing. Kulak had a tremendous series for the Oilers. And again, that depth on defense really came to the fore. When Vinny Desharnais had a tough night in Game 4, Philip Broberg was there to give Edmonton some quality minutes, along with Jack Campbell. Both goalies got a win in this series. And as a result, you come to the last 2 games of the series, tied at 2 games apiece, and 6 Oilers who had not had a point in the first 4 games of the series had points in the final 2 games. That's competition from within, pushing, and as the Macho Man would say, the cream of the crop. That's what you want. You want your bottom guys pushing up toward the top, and that pushed Edmonton over the top in this series over LA. Last year, you would have thought, well, the Kings have the advantage in depth and goaltending. This year, it was the Oilers. Their goaltenders were better than Jonas Korpisalo, and as Edmonton and Bob mentioned, 16 goals over the last 3 games for a team that was second in the league down the stretch in goals against. That was LA. That was the biggest improvement they made, and Edmonton shelled LA in the final 3 games of this series.
Just specific to what Jack was talking about, Evan Bouchard, I just remember we were at the draft and the Oilers took Evan down in Dallas, and Pete Chiarelli said, I finally got my right shot D. And Pete didn't get to live this out as general manager. He ultimately was replaced. But Ken Holland did something. He didn't sit there and just trade away all of the guys that were previously drafted. And the Oilers were patient with Bouchard. I'm not sure everybody out there in oil country was quite as patient with Bouchard. And I think we're finally seeing some reward for that patience. And, because he's not the most assertive guy at times on the ice, I think it frustrates some fans, but there's nothing to complain about what we saw. What we saw in this series, I believe, is going to be a precursor of things to come with him. I think we're looking at a 60 to 65 point defenseman. A lot of people, I remember Dave Tippett saying he reminds them of Larry Murphy. Larry Murphy played 1,600 games in the NHL, had 1,200 points, and was booed out of Toronto, and then went on to win 2 more cups with the Detroit Red Wings. So
after winning in Pittsburgh,
the guy was an excellent puck moving defenseman. You have to hold on to guys like that, and obviously the Ekholm trade. Tyson Barrie, very popular guy, going the other way, but it freed up a spot for Evan on the power play. And it just settled things down a bit for Evan, and the composure and poise that he showed during the course of this series elevated. And now we're seeing what, frankly, many people thought we could see out of Bouchard, even 2 or 3 years ago if they'd just given the opportunity. Now it's come to fruition.
Hey, if we're telling stories about the draft, let me tell one about a year earlier. A 2017 first-round draft pick, also of Peter Chiarelli, who told the Oilers when asked why they should draft him, he said, because if you don't, I'm going to make you sorry you didn't. And that was Kyler Yamamoto, who did not have a point in the first 5 games of this series. But in front of his parents and playing in a rink that he knew well, having been a junior king between the ages of 12 and 14, there was the guy showing up when they needed him most. An assist on the go-ahead goal in the second period, and, of course, the game winner with 3 minutes to go in the third. That's sticking with first-round picks. Bouchard in 18, Yamamoto in 17. Not giving up on guys and allowing them to thrive when it mattered most. And as a result, in a game where Connor McDavid and Leon in a playoff series clinching victory, no one's talking about them.
Pretty remarkable. If you guys are talking about the draft, how about I bring up the 2015 draft? Of course, we know, Bob, who went 1 and 2 in that. Connor McDavid.
Wait, I just said we were going to talk about it.
Connor McDavid and Jack Eichel. Obviously, they headline this second-round matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Vegas is an immensely different team than the LA Kings. I mean, LA plays a 1-3-1 neutral zone and as passive as you'll see. How many times have we seen Vegas come out like a house on fire, hard-pressed forecheck? Bruce Cassidy's a real good coach. He'd run its course in Boston. I think that's fair, but the reality is he's going to get Coach of the Year votes for what he did in Vegas this year. They had the top team in the Western Conference, and they did it rotating 5 goaltenders. So this is going to be a different series. Their defense really activate, and they've got a couple guys, obviously, in Pietrangelo and Theodore that are, top-end offensive guys in the back end. And they're a deeper scoring team. It's funny, this series between Edmonton and LA ended up being relatively high scoring. We'll see the one thing I will say, and Jack's going to certainly allude to this as well, Edmonton's played well in Vegas over the years. Like, I've got all the respect in the world for Vegas. It's going to be a tough opponent. Kelly McCrimmon and George McPhee have built a real good organization. They're relentless in their pursuit for top-end guys. We didn't see much of Stone this year, and that's a little bit unnerving because he's a great two-way winger. It's going to be a good series.
And he had a great series against Winnipeg as well, John.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, this is the Laurent Brossoit revenge tour. I mean, Winnipeg kind of gave up on him, and he was able to beat Winnipeg and beat Connor Hellebuck head-to-head in a 5-game series. And that series typifies what Vegas has done all year long. A lot of people pick the Jets to upset the Vegas Golden Knights in this series. But and remember, I mean, Vegas withstood a 14-0-1 run that Edmonton put together to win the division title. They're a good hockey club. They became the first team in the history of the league to win 4 straight games with 4 different goaltenders. They've found a way. And again, Laurent Brossoit is the ultimate survivor. All those Oil Kings prospects that were churned out between the years of, say, 2010 and 2015, and Brossoit and Curtis Lazar are the 2 guys still alive in the playoffs. Lazar's going to play a Game 7 here coming up, but it makes for an interesting storyline. But as Bob mentioned, I don't know what home ice advantage really means. It hasn't meant much in the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Oilers are one of the few teams that have actually won 2 of 3 on home ice. But as Bob mentioned, they've been even better on the road. Club record 27 wins away from home during the regular season. And, of course, 2 out of 3 in the LA series, 4 straight in Vegas, including a 7-4 shellacking of the Golden Knights a month ago. But as Bob mentioned, that was a different Vegas club. This layoff will help the Golden Knights get reasonably healthy, but Edmonton should feel awfully good going into an arena where they've dominated.
To close out the regular season since January 11th, the Edmonton Oilers had a 29-5-6 record. The Vegas Golden Knights, 24-9-7. Both of those points percentages, guys, top 5 in the National Hockey League. We're in for a treat in this second round as the anticipation builds. Here we go.